The ML Sports Platter is back with you, brought to you by Stanley Law Offices, Batavia Downs Gaming, and Camillus Golf Club. I brought on the New York Times best-selling author ×4, and he's done it again here with Out of the Darkness, the Mystery of Aaron Rodgers, available major bookstores and online where books are sold, Amazon.com and the like. Second to none in journalism, second to none in reporting, second to none as an author and a writer, one of my favorites, and I'm proud to call him a friend as well. Ian O'Connor, congratulations on another one, and thank you so much for spending some time with me here.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Aaron Rodgers, the football player, Aaron Rodgers, the person. Is he more insecure or more confident?
I think a little bit of both. But no, I would say he's more confident and even arrogant. And one thing I found in profiling great players and coaches in sports is most of them are, maybe all of them are, and maybe you need that to be an all-time great. I think that Aaron Rodgers has always had a hard time saying, I'm sorry about anything or I was wrong. But frankly, when I go back and think of Derek Jeter, Bill Belichick, Coach K, and other greats I've written about over the years as a columnist, it seems to be a common trait among them. And I really feel, Mike, that a large part that's due to just fearing that any admission of weakness or fault in any context, that it might follow them into the competitive arena and compromise their chances of winning at the highest level and being an all-time great. So I think that's a big part of why Aaron Rodgers and others I've written books about have had that trait. But I did find that he was willing to concede a couple of things to me when we sat down at his home in Malibu that I found interesting and maybe surprising in terms of making mistakes. But yeah, I think that arrogance and confidence is a big part of why he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
How long do you think he goes?
I think he's got, assuming this season plays out where he's healthy and he's playing, he's not ever going to play again at an MVP level, I don't believe. I think that I deep down, I'm sure he wants to tie Peyton Manning for the all-time record with 5 league MVPs. I think he'll be stuck at 4, but I do think he could be a top 10 quarterback, maybe more like 8, 9, or 10 in the league. He's lost his mobility and athleticism for the most part. So he's a pocket passer now at age 40, turning 41 in December. I think he could still play at a fairly high level and lead this team to the playoffs. And I see him definitely playing next year. He said he wants to give the Jets at least 2 good seasons. Obviously, last year was an unmitigated disaster, so that doesn't count. So, and then after next season, I think then it just depends on where he is physically and how he's playing. But I think the Jets will get 2 seasons out of him and try to make a run. It's going to be very difficult. And trying to get out of the AFC, as you know, with Patrick Mahomes in it, is going to be very, very difficult. But that's the challenge the Jets face.
I'm always curious when folks like yourself, write biographies and target a certain individual, the timing, why that person, etc. So I guess I'll ask, why Aaron Rodgers? Why now? And are you kind of thinking, oh man, I might have to write a back end of this thing if something changes? But why Rodgers? Why now? I guess.
Yeah, I was going to do a biography of LeBron James, unauthorized, and there were other LeBron books out there, and all of a sudden Aaron Rodgers got traded into my backyard, and I thought it was a good time to pivot. I thought this is a fascinating partnership. You have an all-time great quarterback who only has the 1 ring, leaving the smallest market at the end of his career to go to the biggest market to try to win a 2nd ring for a franchise that hasn't been in the Super Bowl in 55 years. So I thought that's a very fascinating thing to look at and see how it plays out. On a personal note, Vince Lombardi coached at my high school, St. Cecilia's in Englewood, New Jersey, and Lombardi lived 8 houses away from where I grew up. So I always wanted to write a Packers book. I was always taken by Packers mystique and aura from the old dynasty days of Lombardi and Starr. And Aaron gave me that opportunity to write a Packers book again, sort of in my backyard. So and from a distance, Mike, I always thought he was a compelling, mysterious, distant figure. I'm usually drawn to those subjects. And I also thought he was an underrated interview. I thought he maybe was the best interview in the NFL. And in talking to some members of the Green Bay media, they felt that way in a sense that during the week, for instance, you can grab him and talk about big picture things. And I found him to be intellectually curious and never spoke in cliches, always in long form responses. So there was a lot there. Obviously, the estrangement from his family, his COVID stance, the fact he's a conspiracy theorist, there's a lot to unpack. So those are the reasons I took this project on.
Right here, you can see it behind Ian right now as well. It's called Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. The author, Ian O'Connor, joining us here on the ML Sports Platter, brought to you by Welch & Company Jewelers and Burn Dairy. You've done Belichick, Jeter, Rodgers, Nicholas and Palmer, so many different legends at this point. But as far as you and attacking the book, and now that they're all finished products and you look back, what book out of all of those are you most proud of?
It's sort of like asking a father which child he's most proud of, because it almost felt, well, I don't want to say it was like labor, but it was every book I've done, it feels like it's taken 3 to 5 years off the end of my life. I hope that's not true because I just turned 60, so I don't know how many years I have, but I think that's a really tough question to answer. I will say this. I always thought Belichick would be the toughest thing I ever did in this business for maybe the obvious reasons, just because of the nature of his program. It was like trying to get behind the walls of the Kremlin to find out inside information about that operation. But Rodgers was every bit as challenging and maybe more so. Even though Belichick was a mysterious figure, I felt there was a sameness about his character throughout the years as a coach in the NFL, where Aaron was more elusive, more of a chameleon. And I actually had, believe it or not, early in the process, more non-returned phone calls and messages from people in Rodgers' life than I did people in Belichick's life. And that was surprising. I had to wear some of those people down or win them over, including Aaron himself at the end of the process. So I would say Rodgers is probably the most challenging project I've taken on. I didn't think it would be. I always thought Belichick would be at the mountaintop. So right now, I guess I would have to say this book. Maybe there's a recency bias involved, but at the very least, it was the most challenging.
So we've had so many, elite quarterbacks through the decades, obviously. And when you say best, sometimes it's different than most talented. The best throwers of the football, maybe in my lifetime, Peyton Manning, Rodgers, certainly are up there in no particular order. Marino for sure. Best quarterback, you can take resumes and say, well, it's the winning and it's the numbers and it's the era and this and that and the other thing. And we can go on and on and on with all this. I don't have Aaron Rodgers in my top 10 all time. And that's not to demean Aaron Rodgers. It's just I try to tell people there is a little bit of this recent postseason thing. And I know the defense, and I know he was spectacular at some points. It's not to demean him, Ian. It's just, I think it's more about trying to tell people we've had all these elite guys. I think people forget how many elite guys we've had in the history of the game. I think you probably disagree with me saying that he's not in my top 10, but where does he fall at this particular point with his resume, his numbers? The chapter still unwritten here with the Jets. He does have a ring, which a lot of folks don't have. Fouts, Marino, Kelly, Tarkenton, and on and on. Where do you land with him in the overall quarterback list?
Well, I think when you look at, for instance, career passer rating, he's number one all time. He's a tick ahead of Patrick Mahomes, and he's got the all-time record for touchdown interception ratio. I think he's the most accurate passer I've ever seen. And he's not the best quarterback ever. You have to give that to Tom Brady because of body of work and the 7 rings. And it's just, you can't overcome that. Now, I do think Mahomes might not surpass his ring total. In fact, I don't think he will. But if Mahomes ends up with 5, he's clearly physically more talented than Tom Brady. He could do a lot more different things. So I would say Mahomes is on his way to being the greatest ever. And it's like the way in golf I look at Tiger Woods with 15 majors as the likely greatest ever over Jack Nicklaus with 18. It's close, but I would give Tiger the slight edge. I thought he was more dominant. He also has more PGA Tour victories than Nicklaus had. And so I think if Mahomes gets to 4 or 5, I don't think he needs to get to 7 or 8. I would see him as the greatest ever. But with Rodgers having the 4 league MVPs, which is more than Brady and more than anyone not named Peyton Manning, and I know rings are more important than league MVPs, given his career passer rating is the best ever, his touchdown interception ratio is the best ever. He does have a ring. He was Super Bowl MVP, which Brett Favre was not in his Packers championship. So put that together, I think he's in the top 10. I think he's safely inside the top 10. I make an argument for him at 5 or 6. The 4 who are definitely ahead to me are Brady, Mahomes, Montana, and Peyton Manning. Now, if he wins, I think if he wins a championship for the Jets, you'll have him in your top 10. Now,
Oh, gosh. Yes, yeah, absolutely. What about Elway, though? You have him ahead of Elway?
I think Elway is where you could put Elway at 5 and then have Rodgers at 6. Elway's the one guy that, because he led his team to 5 Super Bowls, and Rodgers just went to the 1. But Elway was a 1-time MVP. Rodgers a 4-time MVP. And Rodgers' numbers, it was a different game. I understand that clearly are better than Elway's. But if you want to put him ahead of him, then I don't have a major problem with that. I think that this is the reason that the question you asked and the fact that you don't have him in the top 10 is actually one of the reasons why he wanted to trade to the Jets, because he saw the Jets as the perfect opportunity for him to dramatically enhance his legacy. If he wins a championship at the end of his career for that franchise that hasn't been there, right? Since, I always say this and Jets fans get ticked off, since Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, have not even been in a Super Bowl, then that is going to be Mark Messier times 10. Yeah. And so it's funny because Messier won 5 cups in Edmonton, and the one everyone talks about is the one, of course, he won in '94 for the Rangers, ending a 54-year drought. Well, this drought would be 55 years. Can you imagine in the social media age where the NFL is by far the most popular sport in the country, if a guy who's going to be 41 at that point, with all the controversies off the field, if he's the guy who wins a championship for the Jets, what that will feel like? I've said this before, but I think, Mike, it'll be, and I've been doing this for about 37, 38 years, it'll be the biggest New York sports story of my lifetime. Again, unlikely, but doable and not impossible. So we'll see how it unfolds.
It's been an unbelievable career. There's no doubt about that. The final question I wanted to ask you is this. You spent time with Rodgers. You interviewed him and a ton of other people for this book, obviously. When you got done interviewing Aaron and you got done writing the book, if you had one thing where you said, oh, geez, I wish I had gotten that out of him, or I wish I had gotten this out of somebody else. I don't know if you have those moments because, man, your research is so thorough and you have so many interviews and you get so much. I mean, your reporting is so unreal. But did you have that with Rodgers? Because he is such a unique figure where you said, if I could have used that one thing too. Did that pop up?
Well, after my access to him, and I was only granted the one sit down with him, a couple of stories broke. One, the RFK Jr. story, and as far as him being considered for his vice presidential candidate, that was never going to happen because Aaron was never choosing unemployment over high-paid employment in the NFL. They were not going to win the election. He knew that. There was no way Aaron was ever doing that. But I would have liked to have asked him about that. He also talked after our meeting on some podcasts about conspiracy theories more, and I would have liked to have doubled back to him on that, tried to, and he wouldn't re-engage. But really the bigger thing was his brothers. I did speak a lot to his parents about the estrangement, about basically the way they raised him and a lot of other things in Aaron's life. His 2 brothers I would have liked to have spoken to, and they decided not to participate. Actually, Luke, his older brother, did tell me he was not interested in participating, and I never heard back from his younger brother, Jordan, at all. And so that's, listen, you try and you put out messages and you try to work different. not angles, but just other people who are close to those that you're really trying to reach to paint a full and honest and fair and accurate picture of this human being. And that's all I was trying to do. I don't want to make a decision for a reader on whether or not this is a good person, a bad person, or somewhere in between. I try to paint the picture and then let you decide. And I thought that his brothers would help along those lines. And I assume they feared that I only wanted to ask about the negative parts of their relationship or non-relationship now for the past 10 years. That wasn't the case. I had no agenda whatsoever in approaching this project. And I think that ultimately, Mike, is the reason why Aaron decided after I was done writing the book to talk to me. I had to reopen the book. It was because he saw I had no agenda. I think his friends and associates who talked to me relayed that to him based on the questions I was asking them. And so he did make it a better book. And I want to point out that it's unauthorized, obviously, so he didn't owe me a damn thing. And the fact that he invited me to his home in Malibu and sat down with me and talked about the estrangement, about his COVID stance and other sensitive topics, I very much appreciated that.
Well, go get it, folks. Football fans, sports fans, online where books are sold, and nearby bookstores. It's called Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. The author is Ian O'Connor, of course. Past books, bios on Coach K and Belichick, the captain, on my favorite player of all time, The Journey of Derek Jeter, and the most underrated book, by the way, that Ian has ever written, in my opinion, is the one with Sebastian Telfair and the high-stakes business of high school ball called The Jump. That book, the cover is awesome as well. Go get every book this guy has ever written. They're all amazing. And he's one of my favorites, setting the standard in journalism on a daily basis, one of the best in the business, Ian O'Connor. Thanks so much, Ian. Appreciate it through the years. You've come on with me now 20 years or so. So I know you do all these monster big interviews nationally and all the rest, but you've always made time for little old me. So thanks so much for the time. I can't thank you enough.
Hey, it's not little old you, Mike. You're one of my favorites too. You do a great job, and I very much appreciate the kind words and just the opportunity to be with you today. So thanks.